Okay, this is meant to be a variety review and comparison of two new Curcurbita pepo type winter squash varieties that I trialed for the 2017 growing season. The variety on the left, the smaller one with the stripes, is Candystick Dessert Delicata. This is a fairly new variety that was bred by Deppe, and I've heard a lot of good things about it. It's supposed to have a small seed cavity. It's supposed to have very large amount of flesh. It's supposed to be extremely dry fleshed and have a unique sweet savory flavor. I haven't actually tried any of them yet, but I will do that here later and we'll record that progress. As far as the Candystick Dessert Delicata goes, it was an extremely productive variety, but my one complaint would be that the fruit tend to be quite small. The ones I pictured here are the largest ones produced this year, and I would think that the largest ones are in the order of maybe 6 inches long. They're not terribly big. Perhaps it was the growing season, I'm not sure, but they didn't make a lot of big ones, but they were productive. The plants are interesting in that the leaves have a really heavy silvery sort of a sheen to them. It's like a silvery overlay. They're very attractive, and the leaves are really heavily cut, incised or divided. Really nice looking plants. They were moderately disease and insect resistant. Certainly more than some things, but less than others. The variety on my right is a very, very old variety. Possibly, it could even be a direct descendant of Native American varieties. This one is known as Long Pie, and it's native to New England. And this variety is interesting in a lot of ways. When it's immature, it looks exactly like a zucchini. However, as it starts to mature, it develops a orange color. Typically when you first pick these, I picked these right before we had a hard frost, and at that point they were only maybe 30% or less orange, and then over several weeks in storage they've turned completely orange. From what I understand, this is a ripeness indicator, and this will give you an idea when the fruit are fully cured and ready to cook and eat. Supposedly the Long Pie pumpkin makes the best pumpkin pies in the world, and supposedly they can be stacked like cordwood and they will keep all winter. I've read that they're not good cold soil germinators, and I can definitely attest to that. The first sowing that I did rotted out and died completely, and I only had a few seeds left to do a second sowing, so my total production this year was only 4 fruits, and I only had 1 or 2 plants, which is not the best. The Delicatas did fine, and I didn't have any issue with them germinating in the cooler, wetter soils. So that's an interesting comparison. The look of the plants is also quite different. The Long Pie tends to look more like a typical pumpkin vine. It's a more vigorous plant, a larger plant. The leaves are less divided, they're larger, and they're just a plain green. I have a feeling that Long Pie, if I had more plants and if conditions were better, probably would be more productive than the Delicatas. But I'll know that in another year or two after trialing them further. And shortly here we'll cut them open and we'll cook them and we'll compare them for flavor and texture, overall yield. So these are the best examples of each variety. So these are the ones that I would save seed from to move forward with. And that is it for the general comparison of the varieties in terms of their appearance, externally, size comparison, etc. Now we will cook them. Okay, so now I've cut and seeded these 2 winter squash, and I will give my assessment of the characteristics. of them. The long pie pumpkin is on the left. This is a fairly thick-fleshed, not extraordinarily so, but very respectable. It's a darker orange color, and it has a mild, faint aroma. The seeds are large, about the size of a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, and very similar in shape and form. And the rind is hard to medium hard. On my right is the Candystick Dessert Delicata. There was a fair bit of variability in these two. Actually, I cut up 3 different ones, and the one on top, the top right, was the thinnest fleshed, and that one is not very good. The one on the bottom was the thickest fleshed one, and that I find to be excellent. So I don't know what we're going to get. The 3 I cut were all somewhat different. These have a very hard rind. The shell is really difficult to cut through, but I assume that that would mean they would keep for a long while. And the smell of them is very strong. It's a really intense, musky pumpkin kind of an aroma. And the seeds of these are much smaller and much more prolific. They're also harder to extract. I found them a little bit difficult to separate from the flesh. The long pie were very easy to separate fairly cleanly. One thing I did want to mention was that one of the reasons I like to save my own seed of a lot of things, but squash is a great example. So from 2 or 3 fruits of each variety, I have hundreds of seeds. And this is enough seeds. If I didn't save seeds for the next several years, probably I'd have enough seeds for 10 years. These things will keep sitting on a shelf at room temperature in good condition for at least 5 years. In your refrigerator, you can extend that to 6-8 years easily, and in your deep freeze, the lifespan of these is essentially indefinite. Most years I save seed every year, so the excess is just there so that I can, if I have a disaster and all the first planting rots, I have plenty of seeds to sow again. I can give seeds away. I can stockpile seeds in the deep freeze. When I bought the long pie pumpkins, I think I only got maybe 10 seeds. So, what do you pay for that? $3, $5, and you get 10 seeds. But then I can save my own seeds, and now I've got a decade's worth of seed easily, assuming that I didn't save any more for ensuing years, which I certainly will. So there we have our cut and seeded pumpkins. Now we're going to cook them, and then we'll talk about taste once we get them cut up. The Candystick Dessert Delicata is vastly sweeter than long pie. There really isn't any comparison. It's extremely sweet. I've heard people say that it is similar in taste and texture to a date, and that's actually completely true. It's just outrageously sweet, has a very complex and good flavor. It does not require any additional sugar. It could be eaten as is, easily, with nothing done to it. It's fantastic. Nice fine grained flesh, very dry. It's not the least bit watery or soft. These things cook up and they're almost as firm as when you put them in. Incredibly sweet, just excellent. The long pie has a nice color and it has a nice smooth texture, but the flavor is really scarcely better than a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. So not a great flavor. It's not badly flavored, but it isn't particularly sweet. And there's sort of a strong pumpkin-y flavor to it. I think it would be fine in a pie. It would be fine in a soup or a muffin or pumpkin bread. But just to eat it as is, it really isn't good enough for that kind of a purpose. So the benefits to the long pie is it seems to make more pumpkin, and it has more carotenoids, more of the orange color. And if you want to make pies or soups in quantity, this is definitely a good variety to choose. If you want the sweetest, best tasting, best textured one, the Candystick Dessert Delicata is certainly the one to go for. It's definitely a better variety as far as that's concerned. And that's all. Thanks.